I always advocate getting that blood work done because like you said in the beginning, you don't feel your cholesterol dropping. You don't feel your blood sugar usually going down, your blood pressure. These things are happening, but you're not noticing them. And so to get those hard numbers back and to look and to go, oh, wow, it took some adjustment, but wow, changes happen really fast.
What if changing your diet didn't have to feel like a struggle? Hey there, Health Feast listeners. Dr. Rock here, and welcome back. For years, Rachael Brown thought that she was making healthy choices. But despite her best efforts, she wasn't seeing the results she hoped for. Then one shift changed everything, and not just for her own health, but for her entire family. She was able to reverse major health conditions, and she helped her loved ones embrace a whole food plant-based lifestyle. Now she's become a passionate champion about sharing what she's learned. Rachael is the author of For Fork's Sake. She's also a speaker and an instructor who has helped people cut through the confusion of nutrition and making sustainable, joyful changes to their diet. Well, in this episode, we unpack why most people fail when trying to eat healthier, and hint, it's not about willpower. We also talk about the surprising emotional connection we have to food, and how Rachael helps families shift their eating habits in a way that actually lasts. We also dive into the real reason people think plant-based eating is too hard, and why that belief couldn't be further from the truth. If you've ever struggled with staying consistent, faced pushback from loved ones, or felt overwhelmed by the idea of eating differently, this conversation will change the way you approach food forever. So, whether you're on a walk, commuting home, or winding down at the end of the day for bed, this episode is the perfect companion. Prepare to see healthy eating in a whole new way with Rachael Brown. So let's do the show. Hi, Rachael Brown. Welcome to the Health Feast. It's such a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you so much for having me. And it was a pleasure to meet you in person a few weeks ago.
Yes. So as mentioned in our introduction, actually, so Rachael and I met, it was a few weeks ago in Santa Cruz, the first ever Food as Medicine conference in Santa Cruz, just put on by a most amazing organization and the most amazing founder, Reverend Beth Love and Eat for the Earth. How did you, before we get into your story, how did you and Reverend Love meet, or how did you get, I guess you lived there, so.
Yeah, it wasn't until COVID, actually, that I saw something she posted, and she originally was one of the plant pure communities in Santa Cruz, and so during COVID, they took that online, and that's when she really came up with Eat for the Earth, and so it was like Zoom meetings with other people that we couldn't gather in person. And so
cool.
We would meet, and it was just such a lovely connection time to meet other people in this physical area who are trying to do this thing and trying to spread the good news to others. So yeah, that's how I met her.
Yeah. And I've been wanting to have her on the podcast. So Eat for the Earth, for our listeners, is a not-for-profit in the Santa Cruz area whose mission is to, well, very similar. I think we'll get into your mission, which is to spread this, and very similar to my mission, which is to spread this truth, which is that when you eat a diet that consists of whole unprocessed plant food, it has these remarkable powers. So we met at that conference, and it was exciting to, be there. And then you kind of came up to me and you gifted me this amazing book that you've written, which I say is like the ultimate how-to user's guide for how to transition to a whole food, plant-based, no oil lifestyle, or what you call a happy diet. I really love that, actually. I love it because the word happy makes you happy, right?
Kind of the antidote to the SAD diet, the standard American diet that we all
That's right.
eat. So, whole food, plant-based, no oil doesn't exactly roll off the tongue like woofa-pub-no or whatever. So, yeah.
Woofa-pub-no. That would be fun. Tell our listeners what happy stands for.
Healthy and plant-powered. Yay!
I could just imagine you when I was reading it, I was like, oh, she's probably just doing a little jump for joy at the end of each time. And I'm going to say the word,
And I don't mean it in a negative context. I consider myself in some ways to be an evangelist for this type of lifestyle. Evangelist sometimes has negative connotations, but on the other hand, it's like when you know this truth and you've experienced it and there's like decades of research behind it and there's so much misinformation out there, like it requires voices, louder voices that are cutting through the noise. And anyway, I'm curious of your take on that and also how you became one of these evangelists.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I definitely feel that way, and kind of feel that that is my role in a way. But for us, this started 14 years ago, almost 15 years ago. I'd had high cholesterol in my mid-20s. I was told I should go on cholesterol medication, and I thought, that's crazy. I'm an athlete. I'd always been a high school athlete. I ran, I rock climbed, I hiked. And I'd watched my dad be on cholesterol medication his whole life, and he would have these odd side effects. Like he would take a medication and then he'd lose his taste. And so he'd have to change medication and go into something different. And I just didn't want to do the whole pharmaceutical thing because I hadn't seen it work out very well. So I would ask my doctor, what can I do? And they would say at the time, well, cut back on eggs and cheese and exercise more. And so I would do those things and my numbers would go down a little, but they would always creep back up. So that had been going on for a while. And then 14 years ago, I had a 5-year-old nephew who was diagnosed with cancer. And his mom was in nursing school at the time. And she had a professor who asked her if she'd looked at the role of nutrition in cancer. And this professor suggested she read the China study and watch the documentary Forks Over Knives. And my sister-in-law at the time, the summer before, she had taught me how to pull mozzarella cheese. Like we made our own mozzarella cheese. They had a little hobby farm. I mean, we had 13 chickens. My daughter had a little egg business, organic egg business around the neighborhood. So, while we weren't total standard American diet eaters, like my mom was mostly vegetarian. I was raised eating fruits and vegetables with every meal. But we were still eating meat and dairy and all those things. And when my sister-in-law changed their diet overnight, my nephew is now a healthy 19-year-old. So I want to remember to say that he's doing wonderfully. But when she suggested we read that book and watch that documentary, we did. And we were like, why have we never heard this? This is incredible information. And so my kids were 6 and 8, and we decided to give this a go. Like, okay, let's give it a try. We got our blood work done. And then I couldn't get back in for my second blood work draw until day 17. And when I went back to my doctor to get the results, he said, what did you do? Because your cholesterol dropped 50 points in 17 days. And I couldn't do that with medication. So what are you doing? Right. And so that was, I always say for us, like really good news that it worked. And also like, kind of bad news because this was going to, we needed to do this thing now. And 14 years ago, there wasn't so much out there, for how to do this. So that was the start of our journey.
Okay. So yeah, I very relate to that. And I know you know my story because I told it at the conference we were at. And I did this 21-day challenge, and that's twice as long as 10 days, but I also had my cholesterol drop more than 40 points in that amount of time. And that, I think is very motivating for people, right? You see the number go down so much because just as you said, like I had the same experience. I was like, oh shit, now this works. This is why I did this.
Doing it anyway.
And I proved it to myself. And you haven't fully gotten over I would say for me, at least, I hadn't fully gotten over the addictions I had to all these various foods that I used to eat. So while I had seen that empirical proof, and then soon I started discovering that there was so much empirical proof, there was so much research proof, that helps. But talk about that for your transition, 17 days, and then were you like, okay, I'm never eating cheese again? Or was there a sort of up and down, I'd like to say separation, a rocky divorce?
How did we break up?
How did you break up? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, for my husband and I, we really tried, like, okay, we saw it work because we were really black and white when we first did that 17 days. We really wanted to get an accurate read.
Sure.
And it helped some that my husband and my daughter are both lactose intolerant. They still loved dairy though. So they would it was back in the days of like take a Lactaid before eating ice cream kind of situation.
Right.
So yeah, it was, the other reason I wanted to write this for like parents of young children was we really made all the mistakes, I feel like. We tried to go very, very black and white in the beginning. We were like, we know this works, so let's just do it, And this, I read the science behind it, but not kind of the psychology and like you were talking about, like, how do you get your taste buds off this stuff? How do you change what you're thinking behind making this change? And so, I tell a story in the book about my son. I can't remember. He went to a birthday party. I can't remember if he ate 6 hot dogs and 12 cookies or 12 hot dogs and 6 cookies. But in the beginning, it was
He's like, now I get it. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. At home, we're going to eat this way is how we started. And if you're anywhere else, you can eat what you want. So we weren't wanting to impose, like, back to the evangelist thing. We didn't want to make people uncomfortable. We didn't want to make people have to do what we were doing. So we just said, okay, if we go to somebody's house and they make us something, we will gladly eat it. We're not going to be rude. But at home, this is how we're going to eat. But then it so slowly, was this thing of like, well, every eating out was like, hooray, pepperoni pizza or whatever, all the things. But slowly it started to happen that those foods just started tasting less and less good. For us, like the treat for the kids when they were young, if we went out and a babysitter came over, they got to have macaroni and cheese. So it was like their favorite. And, we went whole food plant-based, and I would make a different version, a whole food plant-based, no oil macaroni and cheese. And they couldn't wait to like go to a friend's house or, have a babysitter come and eat macaroni and cheese like they used to. And I'll never forget, they went somewhere else and they came back and they were like, we had macaroni and cheese and it didn't even taste good. So, then once I started diving into more of like the research, how our taste buds work, how these casomorphins work in our system, and learned that our taste buds literally change, like all of us, all of the time, about every 14 days. So that magic of getting to that, day 17 or day 21 and allowing your taste buds to have changed so that they actually recognize the sweetness of just a peach, not added sugar to cereal, or, just the sweetness of a red pepper. My son had this, we used to make whole wheat pita hummuses. I was whole wheat pitas with hummus and a bunch of veggies. We'd have that quite often. And this one time he took a bite and he was like, oh, where did you get these red peppers? And I was like racking my brain.
I love
thinking,
it.
Where did I get these red peppers? Are they different? And it was just that taste bud change was occurring for him. And it was so fun to see in real time because all of a sudden, those formerly tasty things weren't as tasty.
You probably get really excited about produce too, when like good produce and...
Yeah,
I'm just
I love
guessing.
a good farmer's market. Yeah, except for it goes with some of the stuff though that, I love, the rainbow of available. We live in California. We're so spoiled, year round. There's like every color of the rainbow available to eat. But I love like Jeff Novick's work. And this is just one of the things I want to dispel for people, is because a lot of times people tell me, well, I can't do it because I don't live near a Whole Foods, And I'm like, it couldn't be farther from the truth. Like if you live near a dollar store, you can eat this way. You don't have to have fresh, produce. In fact, sometimes frozen produce might be better for you than the fresh produce that you're getting in the store, because frozen produce has been blanched, picked at prime ripeness, and it's got all its nutrients intact, whereas maybe that fresh something that you're picking up the store took 3 weeks to get there, right? So some of these notions that we have in our mind of how it has to look really just aren't true.
So you discovered this way of eating for yourself, for your family. I definitely hear what you say. Like I have young kids, and when I started eating this way, I started eating whole food. Now I wasn't 100% at first. And I'm still not 100%, but I'm got really close to it because my tastes have changed. Like, I don't even, like once a week, my family will order takeout or go out, and I generally speaking, like prefer not to eat that food now because of the way it like affects my body. And, you know, you try to go out and eat no oil, but it's really hard, I would say. Like, unless you know, there's a couple of restaurants, like there's one in San Francisco that is whole food, plant-based, no oil. But for the most part, I had the Thai restaurant once near me that we order from, and I feel like they were putting more oil when I was asking them not to put oil, or it was no different. It was like no different. I was like,
just tastes like it though.
And then I think you went on then to get your certificate in plant-based nutrition, right? You have your certificate in plant-based nutrition from T. Colin Campbell, the Cornell program. Yeah, which is like the premier program for plant-based nutrition. What motivated? I'm so curious, like you experienced this, but then you were like, was it first, I need to learn more about this? Or was there a vision like, I need to learn about this so I can spread this information?
Yeah. Well, you know, I love to research. So I read probably, 9 books when we started going about this and watched all the documentaries. And I was an evangelist. I was like I couldn't really have a conversation in those early days without bringing this up. And we soon realized, like, if we're going to have any friends or people who want to talk to us,
you have to be a quiet evangelist. You have
dial it down. You have to be
I know what I know.
Yeah, totally. But, so in conjunction with this, my cholesterol did go down, but it didn't go down as much as it probably should have. And my doctor said, let's talk about your family history because there could be something more going on here if you want to explore it. And once he heard that my grandfather had Alzheimer's and died of pancreatic cancer, my uncle died of pancreatic cancer, my other uncle died recently of Alzheimer's, my dad's in early stages of Alzheimer's, he is like, there is a genetic test for the APOE gene that you could do if you wanted to find out if you carried this gene. And so, some people don't want to know. They would rather not know. But I thought if there's anything that I could do to prevent this further, I would like to know. So we did have my parents, when they came through town, they gave blood. We found out, their APO gene. And then we did it as well and found out that I carry the APOE 3-4. So not the kind of gene
3-4,
that,
okay.
Right. People with the 4-4 are susceptible to getting Alzheimer's in their 30s. So we're one removed from that. And my son carries the gene as well. So it really helped solidify for me the need to do this. Like, it wasn't just for fun thing to do, or it's, good for the animals or good for the planet, which is all true. But this is like, this changes what may happen to me later in life. And I watch my grandfather with Alzheimer's and I'm watching my dad with Alzheimer's. And so, it really helped, in those times when I would think, okay, well, is it really that big of a deal if I, just have some fries with oil? They've got oil, but they're potatoes, it helped me to shift my thinking to go, no, this is something that I have control over. So that whole, genetics load the gun, but lifestyle pulls the trigger. It helped me to know that I had the ability to whether I pulled that trigger or not. So that was going on. We found that out. My degree is in geography. I've taught yoga and Pilates for many years. And then I went back and I was doing massage. For the 6 years before COVID, I'd been doing a technique called pain neutralization technique. I trained with a doctor in Colorado, and it was a neurological technique to help people get out of chronic pain. And I loved what I was doing. It was fascinating work. But then COVID hit and I couldn't see any clients. And so that's when I actually thought, you know what, I'm home. My kids were in high school doing school online. It's early days of COVID. Right. So I was trying not to drive them crazy or drive myself crazy. And that's when I enrolled in the plant-based nutrition certificate program. And I finished it, and COVID was still going on, and they have another program actually through CNS as well that is their food and sustainability program, which I also almost equally recommend to the plant-based nutrition, because that course talks about food systems at large. How do we get the foods that we have in our grocery stores, or how do commodities work? How does the world food system work, and what can we do about it? So, I finished those 2 courses, and my family was tired of hearing me spout these facts at the dinner table, I think, because we were just hanging out with each other in early COVID days. And I was like, I have to share this information somehow. And
Right.
that's when I decided, I enjoy writing. For my birthday that year, I did one of these, like, write a book in a month kind of things. And I literally wrote it in a month, and then was like, okay, do I really want to, kind of put this out there? And so then decided to go about publishing it. But yeah, I felt like the other thing that happened was I kept trying to give all my friends, anybody who would ask about what we were doing, I kept trying to give them the China study, and they would sheepishly hand it back to me and be like, I couldn't really read it. It was too much science, or, it's not an easy read. It's not a terribly hard read, but if you're not interested in all the data behind this information, it's maybe hard to read. And when I love Colin Campbell. And when he gave me the endorsement for my book, I said, I always hope that people will read this as the entry book, and then they will go on to read the China study, because it's such important seminal information. But for people who didn't have time, for young parents who were already strapped, when I talk to young parents, they're like, I don't really read books anymore. I maybe read some blogs, but I don't have time. So I set about writing the easiest to read as possible book. So literally the audiobook is 4 hours long. Like, I wanted it to be very, quick and easy. Like, why for the planet, why for our bodies is this the best thing? And then how do I actually do this?
It is. It's like the how-to user's guide. As I was reading it, and you did audio. I love audiobooks, but you had given me the print book, and it's like you said, it's actually, it was stuff as I was reading it, I was like, oh, that's so true. Or that's like, I was like thinking about my own success. What I love is that you distilled, I think you say it in the book, like your own 10 years of experience down into 10 days, right? So people don't have to make all the same mistakes, and they don't have to go through the same, like, trials and tribulations. You're like, okay, you almost like lay out, like, here are the pitfalls, right? You say, I mean, I think there's a whole day on just the pitfalls.
Yeah.
And anticipate them and what to expect. That is such a valuable resource. I also know that when I started, I would talk about it a lot. I would share it. I wanted to share it with everyone. And you learn quickly. If people are interested, great. If they ask you about it, great. But otherwise, people are very, like, sensitive about their food and their diet, and I respect that. I was like that too before. I'm curious, like, that evolution for you as you've written this book now. You said friends wanted something that you could give to them, but if you're just like at a dinner party and meeting people, nowadays, like, I don't bring up my diet at all, right? I don't even talk about it. Is that, that's sort of the experience you've been too. I'm curious, like, how you navigate that.
Yeah, it really has kind of, it's been a, I would say, looping oval or funny trajectory. I think the short answer is that now I read the room, right? Or read the person I'm engaging with. Before, I just wanted to share all of this, and if anybody had ears, I would say it, and now it's like, you soon realize that, people get really defensive, because even if you're not saying anything about what they're doing, they might take it personally, that they feel like they're doing something wrong, right? So now I try and engage if somebody is really curious, or if they're just wanting to debate, because sometimes there's that, somebody asks a question, but it's just because they want to tell you that they're doing the carnivore diet and, everything they've learned. So there's some of that, but other times I kind of, Dr. John McDougall was one of my favorites in this space, and still is. He just recently passed away, but I loved his ability to tell the truth no matter what. And so I try and find that balance of being, somebody
he's the other side. He's the other, he was the other extreme. He would just, it's like, let me tell you how it is actually. Like,
totally.
You're eating poison and things that are giving you cancer, and like, why,
Right. Well, and sometimes I feel like it's really appropriate, because people are wanting to, like, paint things in a I don't know, easy picture, or make excuses for what they're doing or whatever. And it's one thing if you have an educated, like, you know what you're doing and you're still choosing to do it. But I feel like a lot of people are just uneducated. There's so much information out there now that it's
That's right.
hard to decipher what's true. Who's telling the truth? There's doctors on every side, saying different things. And, 14 years ago, I will say it's been good and bad, right? But there's, nobody knew what plant-based was really when we talked to anybody 14 years ago. Even vegan was like, now what's the difference between vegan and vegetarian? These days, people know those terms for the most part, but there's now this plethora of junk vegan food available. So people think, oh yeah, I'm vegan because I eat, Oreos and fries and chips and, whatever. So, there's good and bad in this, gaining popularity and, or something saying they're plant-based when they just have a plant in the
Everything
ingredient.
says it's plant-based.
I know.
You go to the grocery store now, they say 3 things. They say it's plant-based, it's gluten-free, and it has 8 grams of protein or whatever.
Right, right.
They're putting that on every label. Like, I'm done
Yeah.
with this. I don't.
Yeah.
I bought
and some of this is-
avocados. The bag of avocados said that it was gluten-free. The bag of avocados.
Yeah. That seems like a problem, a comment on our society.
Okay. No, you're
Yeah.
right. You're 100% right.
Yeah, it can be tricky. I mean, the protein piece is a big one. That for the last few years has been something that, people it's usually the first or second question I get, when people find out we eat this way and our kids eat this way. And I'm like, but what about the protein? And this is where I kind of read the situation because, sometimes I get snarky and I'm like, who do you know who is deficient in protein? Like, name me one person that you've ever known of, So, or like, how many grams of protein do you need every day? Like, most people can't answer that, So, or I say, I've never counted my protein in my life ever. And, I'll probably die tomorrow, but I seem to be doing okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Not to say that it's not important. And if you were a junk food vegan and not getting like beans and lentils, like that would be a problem. But to your point, I think what you're saying is if you're eating a well-balanced plant-based diet, you're going to be getting regular beans, legumes, maybe some tofu, and all plants have protein. I think that's the thing that surprises people. It's like, oh no, fruit actually has some, everything has amino acids and our body pulls all those amino acids throughout the day. So yeah, totally.
Broccoli.
The example
Broccoli
I
has
always,
more protein than steak, right? So, so it's like that basic understanding. If you're eating real foods and an abundance of real foods, then you don't have to worry about it. But it is tricky to make sure people understand what real foods are.
What are some other questions you frequently get? Or I guess how do you your book talks about this, but people are going to start getting questions and how do you coach people through that?
Yeah. I think something I underestimated in the beginning was the social pressure of doing something different. Right. And I think a lot of people I've talked to who over the years will say, oh, I did that for a while. But usually when they have changed, it's because one of two things. One, they were hungry. So I'm always like, oh, that's fantastic. But let me tell you, you weren't really doing it right. You shouldn't be hungry. You don't have to be hungry eating this way, right? So then you can get into calorie density and how, you can eat a lot. You can eat all the fruits and vegetables and legumes and nuts and seeds and grains, and you eat as much as you want. The weight, if you have excess weight, it will be shedding off of you as you're continuing to eat all this food. So that's a conversation. But the second one would be it was just too hard. People in my family didn't want to eat this way, or I was the only one I knew eating this way. And so it's why I put in the book a whole section on resources in the end, because I found with Eat for the Earth during COVID, there are now online, Eat for the Earth is a worldwide, there were people from around the world that would join the Zooms. Center for Nutrition Studies Whole Communities is another fantastic one where, you can hop online and meet people who are also experiencing the same ups and downs and the same journey. So I think it's so important to have resources at your disposal and to stay in it. I recommend when people are starting, like, pick a documentary or a book to read every week or every month, just to keep it at the forefront of your mind and to remind yourself that you're not the only one going through this. There are people around the world, millions of people are choosing to do this for their
Thank
health.
you.
You're
Yeah.
not alone.
This is why, well, one, I'm so grateful you came on to tell your story and share your book. But this is why I started a podcast, actually, because when I was making this transition, I felt very isolated. Like, this was 2016, like 8 years ago. Like, my family wasn't eating this way yet. Most of the people I worked with, nobody. I mean, there was one person in my department who was vegan, but it was had been that way for a long time and was fine eating like kind of processed vegan food, and probably in moderation. He's a pretty healthy guy. But here I was going to this diet for my health because I had prediabetes and high blood pressure. And I remember feeling kind of alone doing it. And just to your point, like going out with friends, and those early days, like after I had done 3 weeks, I would sometimes go out and I'd be like, okay, I guess I'll have this, or I guess I'll have that. It was out of accommodation. It wasn't because I actually, like, I had, at some point, maybe several months in, I had to have this like conversation with myself where I was like, I don't really want to eat that food anymore. Like, why are you doing this to please other people? Because I would come home from those meals and I would feel terrible. And then like, I would feel like hungover the next day from just the food. You know what I mean? And then I was like, why are you doing this anymore? So that's a great message to, I think, send to people. Not message, but like to prepare them to think about like, how are you going to navigate? I mean, what do you say to people? I've had patients, for example, say like, and you mentioned it earlier, like you want to have friends and like they stopped getting invited to dinner parties or to going out to eat. And that's a real kind of real world problem because social connection is so important.
Yeah, we are social creatures, right? So, we like I said early on, we didn't want to force this on anybody. Well, we wanted to, but we wanted to have friends. So we stopped trying to force it on anybody. We soon found that our closest friends were like, even if they didn't want to do this, if we were getting together, they would call ahead of time and say like, hey, I want to make something that you can eat. What can I make? Can you give me a recipe or something? And so people were very accommodating once they realized like this wasn't just like a fad thing that we were trying. I think for us also saying this is a health thing. This is something we need to do for our health. And so instead of taking medication, like this is what we're doing. Once people understood our commitment to that, it did seem to change. And then, I also talk about in the book, like we started bringing our own food. We would offer to bring, hey, we'll bring our own main or we'll bring a side that everybody can enjoy. And I caution people, like, you're going to need to make more than you think because make something delicious, but you want to make sure there's going to be some left for you because oftentimes we would make something that people had no idea was whole food, plant-based, no oil, and they would be like, oh my gosh, this lasagna is amazing. Can I get the recipe? It's like, what? There's no meat or cheese, So, so we would just, it can, I'm not going to lie, it can feel lonely, especially in the beginning. But like other things, like you find your tribe, So it may not at first be people in your immediate surroundings, but through those online resources, you will be able to find a support network. And if there's no one else to join around you, you have the opportunity to be that person to start something, which can be amazing also. We've done food swaps with families. So, we would cook meals for each other and just rotate through that. It was a super fun way to get other people involved. Food swaps. So there's a lot of different ways you can go about it. But I do want to be upfront with people. But, I don't think this is different. I mean, even if you were doing, paleo or the carnivore diet, like you might feel somewhat the same if you went out, right, with a group of friends or let's say you stop drinking and everybody's still drinking, there's lots of situations where you feel this. It's not just in eating, making a change in plant-based eating.
Yeah. I think eating is a hard one though, because people go out for drinks and things, but it's less frequent than like we're eating, generally 3 meals a day. And if you work somewhere, you might be eating meals with people every day. And so, some of it is just for me, it was like just embracing what I was doing, like not feeling bad about it, not worrying that other people were going to be feeling bad because of my choices. And then realizing like there's a time and a place where I talk about it and I don't talk about it. I just had lunch like with a friend yesterday who I've known for almost a year now. And we've met for coffee and things like that before, but I usually suggest places where I know I'm going to get something good that's plant-based. And the same yesterday, we're at a restaurant and then I admitted to him, I was like, oh, by the way, because about a year and a half ago, I became fully vegan. So I was like, oh, by the way, I'm vegan. Like, I almost didn't want, I didn't want to share that because I was like, no, what does he think of me now? He has to know. But, there's a little perception that people have sometimes when you've made this choice. So I say, that's a very important part to me, but it's not what defines me. So I love what you said,
Yeah.
read the room. Read the
Yeah.
room because sometimes it's just not the thing you want to talk about. I've been invited
Yeah.
to barbecues and it's like, I'm not going to talk about what everyone is eating is not, ideal for so many reasons. I'm just going to say,
You could just like pass out cigarettes, like this is the same. Does anybody, we're dealing with carcinogens here.
Right.
Anybody want a cigarette?
right.
Yeah,
Right.
Dr. Doug Lisle has you can find him on YouTube. He does a great talk about like kind of the psychology behind this. And I recommend that.
Pleasure
to people
trap.
because-
Yeah. The pleasure trap. Yeah.
He does that, and he himself says, he'll sit at a Thanksgiving dinner or whatever and not bring it up. Like sometimes it's really not worth it. You want to preserve relationship. And then sometimes like I hear that Dr. John McDougall saying, but like I really love somebody. I want the best for them. So I want to offer this to them and then they can make a choice, And I just want to point out that you were doing this as a doctor, right? Like I think for some people it's mind blowing that as a doctor, you are making a health choice for your body and still it was hard and uncomfortable.
yeah.
Like that's mind blowing because I think some people think like, oh, well it should be easier somehow.
Yeah. Well, obviously now when I'm in a professional setting or talking to like people in any setting where I am my professional self, it's like, oh, I'm a lifestyle physician. Of course I'll talk about this. It's really those social situations where, one thing I love about the philosophy behind AA program, they have this slogan for their own program, Alcoholics Anonymous is attraction, not promotion. And that has sort of become my mantra too. It's like, live this lifestyle, really embrace this. I love this lifestyle and look at what it has done for me. And not just me, it's done for so many people I know now. And then people see that. They see that or they sense, I think there's a change, a shift in one's energy when you start eating this way. And you see who comes asking you about it, people you'd never expected. And how many, I'm sure you've had this experience, like how many people in your life now that you never would have thought, now not everyone, but people make changes. I tell you, my very good friends that I went to medical school with, doctors are the worst in terms of lifestyle, or one of the worst. But they've all made changes. And, it was like we would take these annual trips. And like the first year I was like, oh, I'm just going to eat whatever they eat. And then I came back from that trip and I felt terrible. But then the next year I was like, no, this is my lifestyle now. And but I really resonated with me what you said, which is, your friends, they ultimately like love you. They care about you, So if they see that this is a part of your life and this is who you are now, like I've been so amazed at actually, we talk a lot of times about how people ostracize you, but actually the opposite too, like how people really, because they love you, they embrace this part of you. And then you'll go over to their home and they're like, oh, I looked up this recipe on my friend when I visited in Texas, they looked up this recipe on Forks Over Knives. Like they never themselves eat that way, but they made this tropical granola that they found on Forks Over Knives. And they found these restaurants specifically because they knew that would be important to me. So I tell people, and I think I want to hear your experience, like you don't underestimate who you might impact.
For sure. Yeah, and I'm with you. It's some of the people that you would least expect. Some of the friends I thought would jump right on board have not. And others have, come to it slowly, like they want to dip their toes in it. Or maybe they were waiting to see if we would just throw in the towel at some point, But, probably my biggest example is my father-in-law. He was the guy, he grew up in Montana, and he's the guy who, like, a meal was not a meal without meat, and he would cut the fat off his steak to eat it. Like, that's my father-in-law. Cowboy hat, cowboy boot, the whole deal. And 4 years ago, almost 4.5 years ago now, he was diagnosed with brain cancer. And they kind of made fun of us, a little bit for the way we ate, I think they didn't understand it, thought it was just kind of this, weird thing we did. But, we'd been eating that way for 10 years at that point, or this way for 10 years. And when he was diagnosed, he was like, okay, we'll change what we're eating. And they went whole food, plant-based, no oil. And, his glioblastoma, he's survived 4.5 years, which is not very common. He was also diagnosed with Parkinson's.
We hit a glioblastoma,
Yeah.
For our listeners, that's like the most aggressive form of brain cancer.
Right. And they weren't able to get all the tumor. Yeah. But, this is back to the China study, right? Like, if you know that animal protein is literally feeding tumors and you can turn off that mechanism to feed tumors, then you're buying yourself a lot of time. And we don't like to talk about it, but we all have cancer cells in us. We're all kind of walking around choosing to feed or to starve cancer cells. So, I wrote this thinking that, our experience was so profound, and I want this for families, for young kids, so that, we look at the obesity epidemic and just, I don't want kids to have to struggle with this their whole lives, or have diabetes, at a young age, get type 2 diabetes and have to deal with this their whole lives. But it's funny because the people who really have responded are like people in their 60s. And I think it's because they're finally starting to have health problems that are catching up with them and going, oh, wait. This is serious. Like, I want to do something about this, and I can do something about this. So I still am super impressed when, I remember those days as, having young kids and being super busy as a parent. But, you talk about things that you want to give your children for the rest of their lives. And this is one of those things that, my kids are 20 and 22 now. They're away at different states in college, and they choose to eat whole food, plant-based. For the most part, no oil. One of them eats quite a bit of, like, I would say, some processed, more processed stuff, but vegan stuff. But that's, I'm so happy for them that even they were 6 and 8 at the time, right? Their lives had been filled with pepperoni pizza and, all the standard American junk, goldfish, And so they were able to make the change. And, a lot of times parents think that it's hard for kids, but in my experience, it's actually easier for children to make this change than adults. Kids, if they hear a story or have a picture of what happens to animals for us to be able to eat them, like, their heartstrings are still attached, like in ways that ours aren't, I think. Adults can just kind of block that off and still eat chicken wings, even though, they just saw a picture of what that looks like. But kids can't do that as much. And they stick to their guns.
2 of my kids, I have to tell you, like, we're just going through this right now because we told our kids when you're at home, you're going to eat this way. And when you're out and you go to school, or if you have school lunch or something like that, or you go to a birthday party. But, 2 of my kids have basically sworn off most animal. It's my daughter's allergic to dairy already. So there's very little consumption of these things now in my family. And it's been so fascinating to watch them naturally just not want those things anymore, or to pare them down more and more. And then we got a dog that's what made me think of it. We got a dog a couple of years ago during the pandemic. And I think that had a huge impact, much more so. You're right. It has a bigger impact on kids because they can just see. It becomes baffling how adults will, prioritize one species over another, but kids are sort of a little bit more in tune with the oneness of all beings. And that way it's really beautiful to think about how kids sort of naturally gravitate toward this when given the right environment.
Yeah, I love, that reminds me of Dr. Melanie Joy's book on carnism. I never get the title. It's Why We Eat Cows, or eat pigs, wear cows, and So I can't remember. It's a fantastic book, but she talks in there. She has a lecture on, you can find on YouTube, and she shows this picture of meatballs. It's like spaghetti and meatballs. Like, it looks so good, and then she's like, "And what if I told you these were golden retriever meatballs?" And everybody's disgusted and horrified. But like each culture has a few, around 7, if I remember right. Acceptable things to eat, and it's just socially like what we're used to. But yeah, I think for kids who are young and could, like, a dog is similar to a cow, is similar to a pig, so yeah, and it's wonderful to watch them.
The kids are also just really impressionable. They're really impressionable, right? Like,
yeah.
And so they're impressionable either way. Like, when I was eating a lot of junk in the past, like, I would bring home, like, McDonald's, and I'd be so excited about it. Of course, like, if you grow up in that environment, then that's what you're going to want to eat. And then I also started getting excited about farmers markets. Like, oh, this is in season, or this is in stock, or this isn't. That energy. We had a guest on, David Goldman. He's the science advisor for the Game Changers. He's a researcher, and he said, you think of it like a party, and it's like, wait, do you want to go to a party where there's all these rules, where everyone has to sit a certain way, or do you want to go to a party where everyone's having fun? And so I think about that a lot. I think about how can this lifestyle, because really for me too, that's why we called the show a health feast, because people think of health as something restrictive. But
I think the magic too in watching your kids, like you were saying, discover it for themselves, or then start to make that choice themselves, is so gratifying as a parent, to see that it's not because you said you can't have this thing, or we don't eat that, or whatever, but to see them experience. And maybe they have to eat, too many pieces of cheese pizza after not having it for a long time, but then they get it themselves, and to have that intrinsic drive to feel good is really magical. But to your point about the feast, I am so with you. And when people are concerned that they can't do this because they, don't know how to cook this way, they think it's going to take too much time or be too expensive or whatever, helping them have the tools to see that whole feast, that whole platter, that entire farmer's market, that is just like a palette. You get to paint whatever you want and enjoy in so many different ways. All this abundance of food. It's not limiting. It's not restricting. It's not scarcity mindset. It really is abundance. And helping people discover that is a lot of fun.
Yeah. How do you, so locally, what kinds of things do you do to connect with other people who eat this way and are on this journey?
I am a part of the Eat for the Earth organization, and they do Salud en tu Plato now. They've taken what Nelson Campbell started in his plant pure communities and the Community RX program that was started. That's T. Colin Campbell's son, and they've now sold that enterprise. But it's these 2-week programs to help people. They get their blood work. They are introduced to eating this way. They have support. They have mentors who check in. They have things to watch online, and then they get their blood work back. And so I've been involved with that organization, and we do outreach to the Hispanic community here, many farm workers who are pre-diabetic, who have some health issues, and who this hasn't been traditionally offered as an option.
Amazing.
So that's been a ton of fun. I consult with people, so whether it's locally or via computer, many people just want a little extra help. They read the book, or maybe they've tried it before and they're like, I'm stuck on this one thing, or I want to do this, but my partner doesn't want to. How do I do this with somebody in the household that doesn't want to do it, or whatever the case may be? That's really fun to get to journey with people who are doing that.
Rachel, I want to get your opinion on this. You said your partner doesn't do this, and we had some guests on recently, the Gurmans, Bob and Fran Gurman. Are you familiar with them?
I'm not.
This 80-something-year-old, they're 80-something-year-old couple. You should look up their YouTube channel. It's like young at any age. And they're whole food plant-based, and they teach Tai Chi on their channel.
Wow.
And they're a really wonderful couple. And they do coaching as well. And actually, much like you, that I know half the proceeds from your book go to charity, right?
Yeah.
Which is remarkable.
And 1% to 1% for the planet. Yeah.
That's right. Their proceeds from all their work goes to, they lived in Thailand for many years, so they do efforts to prevent child trafficking. And they said the number one thing they get in their coaching, actually, they've seen so many relationships end, marriages end over this. And I was like, whoa, because my wife is totally on board with this. So like do you see that? And also I want to just curious, like, was it as easy for your husband to kind of come on board?
So I know of one woman who, she actually went to True North, and it was during a stint there that she decided to, but I think she'd been eating this way for a while. I personally haven't met anybody who's like ended their relationship over this, but I can see how, if you've been doing something a long time, it can feel threatening or challenging, or like you're not the same person, which I think in healthy relationships, we should be able to grow and expand and change and all that. But yeah, it can be difficult. I mean, I tell my favorite story because I am maybe not, this is where like reading the room, right? Like depending on the responses. I mean, sometimes people will be like, well, my kids only like French fries. And I'm like, well, I only like dark chocolate, but that doesn't mean I get to eat it every meal, So sometimes I think we have to be the parent. We have to be, we have to draw some lines and do a hard thing that will make things better in the long run, right? So I think of making these changes in that way. Like, yeah, sometimes it's difficult, but hard things just because it's hard doesn't mean it's bad or wrong.
Yeah,
So
that's right.
my husband, he was on board, but he's a big mountain biker, and he used to cycle with this group of guys like 4 hours every Wednesday afternoon, and they ride hard. And unbeknownst to me, he would go on Wednesday afternoon before, like at lunch, he would go get a carne asada burrito because he was so concerned that he wasn't going to have the energy to keep up with these guys, like
The protein. I need the protein.
Yes, he needed the protein, right?
Yeah.
And it was like, I think it was like 3 weeks in a row. For some reason, he had a meeting that went too long, and so he couldn't go get his burrito. So he just ate, like a cup of McDougal soup or whatever that he had in his office. And he realized, like the second or third week, like, I'm not dragging in the back. I'm actually able to ride in the front. Like, I feel better than I ever have. And that's when he kind of confessed to, like, I'd been eating burritos, but now I'm eating just beans and rice and guacamole in my burrito. So yeah, but one of my favorite stories is a woman, and I thought this was so brave, and I just loved it. She was an older woman in her 70s, and she talked about, she's the primary cook especially with older couples. This is fairly common. She was the cook, and she had learned about this, and they had health problems, and she was wanting to make changes, and her husband was not on board. And so she was cooking separate meals for the two of them, which I am like, I'm not a short order cook. That's way more than I would do to begin with. I would just say, like, you have to cook for yourself if you don't want to eat this way. But she was cooking both. And then one day she decided, you know what? I'm just going to keep cooking what I'm cooking, but I'm going to make his meat, but I'm just going to boil it. Like, I'm not going to season it or do all the things. She would take the meat that he wanted, and she would just boil it in water and put it on a plate for him. And it didn't take too long, she said, before he was like, okay, can I have some of what you're having? Because it looked, she has like a rainbow full of colors and all these different foods. And he had this like piece of boiled meat, which we don't really like meat, I would argue. We like what goes on meat, like the sauces and all the, yeah. So I love that example because she was like, she was still doing what he wanted, but she was showing him in a way also, like, there's so much more. And so he got to make the decision for himself, but she kind of helped him there. I loved her way of doing that.
Yeah, I love that too. I had a patient, it reminds me, I had a patient who helped transition to this way of eating, and older guy is retired, and you go out with his friends for lunch. And when he stopped eating this way, he said, oh, they're all giving me a hard time. And so the comeback he would say was like, you only like that meat because they're rubbing plants all over it.
So
right?
True.
Like, just to your point, like if you eat just a plain unseasoned, like with no herbs and sauces, like that's the thing. So you also talk about them, and I really liked this, the importance of eating dinner together. And like I think you have a question. We do this too in the car ride. We do some questions we go over every day. High, low, what the heck?
Yes.
High, low, what the heck? I'm gonna use that one. We do like in the morning we do something I'm excited for and something I'm grateful for. And the end of the day we do something like I'm proud of and something that was hard for me. But the what the heck is like, what's something strange or odd or out of left field that came up for me today?
Yes, yes, exactly. Yeah, there is some incredible research behind sitting down as a family together for dinner. And these days, kids have tablets, parents are busy. Like I get it. There are so many distractions, but I do think there's this sense of togetherness that can be built around a table of setting things aside and just coming together to share a meal together. There is something special there. And research actually backs that up in crazy ways, like what it can mean for your kids down the road, just because you sat down and had dinner together. And there's also great psychology behind not like when you're eating, just eating, right? Eating in community with others, not looking at a device or watching something, listening to something, but engaging with others in doing the same thing. So yeah, we had family friends and that was their question or those, high, low, and what the heck. And it just became so fun because, these what the heck, everybody has some odd things that happen throughout the day. So it's a chance to like throw those out there, like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do with this crazy thing happened today. And it keeps it quite a lively discussion going. And the other thing we did was this, they were key jar questions. Like an elementary school teacher came up with these, and it was just a simple mason jar with questions in there folded up. So, everything from like, who in your class could use an extra friend? Or if you could be anybody, who would you be? Like all these just off the wall questions.
Oh,
but the magic
cool.
was that, like a kid got to pick out of the jar, pick the question, read it, and then everybody could answer it. And you just do like one or two a meal. And then the next night, the next kid can pick it. And it just becomes this really fun game that just fosters a lovely time of just a break from the outside world, a break from everything that's been done during the day and maybe that still needs to get done. And just helps for kids who maybe are not wanting to try to eat something, like maybe they're not excited about dinner. But if they've been active during the day and you have really good food and you're talking, it just kind of happens that you'll eat what's in front of you if you're hungry, and you don't really put up a fight if you're busy having fun with those around you.
That's true. Oh, I love that. Yeah. If you're busy having fun, you're not going to argue there's, this or that and I imagine you're a really good cook. You've been doing this for a while. So you sort of figure out like how to match flavors, and a lot of people don't cook, Rachel, or they have an aversion to it. And I don't think you have to be a gourmet chef, but like what would you say to people who are like, oh, I'm just, it's not something I want to invest the time in or I'm not a good cook.
Yeah. Well, I think it's kind of funny because we all have to eat, right? So we're going to eat one way or the other. So whether you're, farming that responsibility out to somebody else or you're doing it yourself, like we all have to eat. So I again go back to Jeff Novick when he was divorced and had a young daughter. I want to say she was 8 or 10. And so he was they ate this way, and he was coming up with recipes that she could make when she got home from school before he was home from work. And so my favorite is like, you don't have to be a chef at all. And I would argue like, I'm not an amazing cook. I'm not the baker in our family because I don't like measure perfectly things.
Oh,
my husband, if we have to
neither.
bake something, that's my husband. Yeah. I'm like tossing a little of this, tossing a little of that. So sometimes things are amazing and I can never recreate them because I don't know exactly how I made it. And sometimes things aren't amazing. But anyways, Jeff Novick, he has a soup recipe that he allowed me to put in the book, which an 8 or 10-year-old can do. All you need is a can opener and a pair of scissors, right? So you can make this huge batch of soup and literally eat off it
It's
for
like
5 to 7
can of beans,
days.
can of tomatoes, some like
A
seasoning.
bag of frozen vegetables.
A bag of frozen vegetables.
Yeah, and what kind of even if you leave the seasoning out and you want like Italian soup one night, or the next night you want kind of curry flavored, you could, just depending on
You can
the
just put different
seasonings.
spices. Yeah.
Totally. Exactly. But yeah, I am all for this simplified cooking. And there's some secrets that are not so secret, but once you learn them, batch cooking things just to make it really simple and easy. Once a week, cooking up a big pan of potatoes or tossing a bunch of brown rice or quinoa in the Instapot so you have some to pull off it, and having just these things on hand so you can just throw simple meals together. Or for hungry kids, teenagers, having things like brown rice, they can just add some cinnamon on top, or some frozen blueberries, and there's a fantastic snack, right? So it's kind of getting outside the normal box of what we think of as meals or snacks.
Now we roast. Yeah, my wife loves to roast those Japanese sweet potatoes. We just roast like a whole bag of them on the weekend, and then they're available to just take out of the fridge. And
one of my favorite snacks.
What are you cooking for the do you have any? Like, how do you do holiday meals? Are they elaborate or?
We do Thanksgiving with my parents, and it's with two other couples like my aunt and uncle and another couple. So we all kind of share, but I mostly make plant-based, whole food plant-based, no oil versions of everything that mostly everybody loves. So, a few years ago, I made I went all out and we made like a millet loaf that was like you put like rice paper over it and basted it.
Oh, wow.
But we were all you know what? It was a lot of work and it was not anything that crazy. Like, we don't really miss turkey. So, and Thanksgiving, I have to say, really all the holidays, if you think about it, all of the side dishes are based around plants. It's really the turkey is the only thing, or the ham is the only thing. There's a lot more dairy, I think, in Christmas kind of stuff. But man, Thanksgiving's easy. I've been using for probably 18 years a cooking light recipe for stuffing that's a sausage stuffing. But I just replace the sausage with soy curl. I make spice herbs with soy curls, and use sourdough bread and vegetable broth, and it's a fantastic stuffing that everybody loves. I make the Esselstyn's Mommy's mushroom gravy that everybody loves, garlic mashed potatoes. My son usually makes a pecan pie. I'll make a pumpkin pie. We'll do a salad of some sort, and we do like potatoes, like some sort of sweet potatoes. We kind of mix it up. So we'll pick a few new recipes.
You're getting me hungry. I'm getting hungry. I want to. It sounds so good.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's all delicious.
Yeah. Exactly. I was about to say. I think sometimes people they don't realize how delicious and enjoyable this can be, and that you're eating the same things. Like, all the things you listed are like everything you'll see at Thanksgiving tables around the country, and you're just changing some of the ingredients. That's at the end of the day. I tell people, you're just changing some of the ingredients.
Exactly. And, sometimes I wanted to bring up the other argument that people sometimes give me is like, oh, this is going to be really expensive and I can't do this. But when you think about it, when you remove from your grocery cart the meat, the cheese, the milk, the ice cream, the cream, all of it, you can literally fill it with, this, fruits, vegetables, beans. You can buy expensive nuts that macadamia nuts, all of a sudden, toss them in because you're going to come out ahead anyway. So it's no more expensive. Delicious.
Totally. My grocery bills went down. And then maybe now they've come up a little because I've found these farmers markets have like very seasonal produce that will be kind of a little bit on the pricier side. But you know what? I love that my kids get excited when I come home with like pixie tangerines or quiches.
Totally.
Like, whoa, like they're back in season. That's so cool.
Exactly. And to have your kids be excited about them is such a win, right?
That's right. So I will say this, I'll ask you this, not to be like a Debbie Downer, but I confront this all the time, and this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. But like, if you look at rates of chronic disease, they're actually going up. If you look at rates of obesity, it's actually going up. And we need more people like you and more books like this, or your book in more people's hands. But how do you... what's your vision for the future, and how do you sort of navigate like the reality versus what I think you and I both know, which is this sort of needs to be more of the commonplace?
Yeah, I keep hoping with you that this news will spread, and in some ways, I just think it has to, right? Because as you well know, our healthcare system is not going to be able to support an entire nation that is needing so much care, and almost all of it being preventable, in most cases reversible even, disease that is just brought on by what we're choosing to put at the end of our fork every day. So, the Debbie Downer part of me is like, maybe it takes our healthcare system collapsing, and maybe it
Yeah.
takes there not being options for people. I hope that's not the case. I hope that
Right.
that really the message spreads and people see that it doesn't have to be complicated. They don't have to get on a weight loss drug. That's, that might be a short-term solution, but just like, I think, like I said earlier, the advent now of all these processed foods and what Rip Esselstyn calls crap, calorie rich and processed foods,
Calorie
right?
rich
The
and
Impossible,
yeah.
the Beyond Burgers, like in the beginning it was so exciting because these are things, you can have and mainstream restaurants have. And yet we know now the science shows that people are more ill eating these things than even just the standard American diet. So, while some people can use these as a gateway drug, if they will eventually give them up and start eating black bean burgers or quinoa burgers or beef burgers,
Yeah.
then they'll recognize or realize the health benefits. But in the same way of this whole, all the weight loss drugs and all the alternative things that really don't get to the source of the issue are maybe setting us back a little. But I'm hoping that the need is so great and we have something to offer that doesn't cost a lot, that is available to everybody, minus the food apartheid, food desert kind of situations. But even then, even if you just have a dollar store nearby you, you can go buy a bag of rice, you can go buy a bag of lentils or beans, a can of vegetables, and you can do this. So the more we can spread this news to everybody, this is not just something for people who are, it is literally for everybody. And so the more we can get that across, the better.
That's
but
right.
I wish
That's
I knew
right.
how. I asked Colin King a Ball a few years ago, like, if you were us, what would you do? Because I don't know what else more to do. And this is a man in his 90s who has spent his entire life, right, trying to get this message out. And he said, do just what you're doing in your own communities, in your own sphere of influence. Do what you're doing. Keep sharing about this. And I think that Margaret Mead quote that I'll probably butcher, but it's never been anything other than a small group of committed people that makes change in the world. And so I hold on to that we have the truth. We have something that works, and it works for everybody. So it'll just be continuing the march forward and trying to link arms.
I have that quote. I have that Margaret Mead quote on my bathroom vanity. It's like one of several that I have because you have to. I love that you started the answer to that question with the word hope, and I also have a lot of hope. I think sometimes we do have to go through more struggle before we emerge stronger. The beauty of this way of eating is, it's a truth. One of our guests recently said it's a truth because it's a truth because once you realize like it's what's best for you, it's best for planetary health, it's best for like the earth, the food system, like the soil, the animals, and when something's a truth, it sometimes takes a while before it becomes a universal truth for everyone.
Yeah.
Okay, well, Rachel, we ask one question to all of our guests, which is you are at the Health Feast, but you're coming to our proverbial group Health Feast, and we ask everyone to bring a lifestyle, like a mindset tip or a life philosophy. So what is Rachael Brown bringing to our Health Feast?
Well, I have a couple. I would bring two things. I think one, we covered it earlier, but just the idea of abundance. Like this, you have so much at your fingertips when you just start to dive into learning about what whole food, plant-based, and oil can do for you, for the planet, for animals, for all life on Earth. I mean, there's so much there. And it's not about scarcity. So that's one. And the other I would say is take the time when you're at the beginning of this or looking into it, to know yourself and to think about, I talk about this in the book, how you're going to go about making this change is probably how you've made other changes in the past. So for some people, like that is a black and white, 10-week or 10-day, 2-week start, 21-day start, whatever. For other people, it's a lot easier to come in slowly, right? To add greens once a day to different meals, to have fruits, to make small incremental changes. And it's not that it's right or wrong. You'll get to the same outcome. But for some people, it can really help. I always advocate getting that blood work done because like you said in the beginning, you don't feel your cholesterol dropping. You don't feel your blood sugar usually going down, your blood pressure. These things are happening, but you're not noticing them. And so to get those hard numbers back and to look and to go, oh, wow, it took some adjustment, but wow, changes happen really fast. I can keep doing this, and then to just do it again for another 10 days. And then at the end of that, try it again for another 10 days. So know yourself, look at yourself, and find the support you need because you can do it. Millions of others have, and you will feel so much better in the long run.
Those are beautiful, beautiful, beautiful things you're bringing. I love that you're bringing the abundance of this way of eating and lifestyle to our health feast. That's the perfect thing to bring. And you're meeting yourself where you're at is what I'm hearing, which is so true. A lot of times we are so hard on ourselves and tell ourselves we need to be able to do things a certain way because somebody else did it that way, but we're all different. So I appreciate that so much. Okay, well, this was awesome. If people want to learn more about you, the book, we'll put your website in our show notes, but what's your website?
www.forforksakebook.com. And if you head over there, if you sign up I send out a really short newsletter every week, and it's got some recipes or tips or
cool. I'm going to sign up for that.
Yeah, definitely. And, when you sign up, you get a printable, downloadable guide that you can print out for oil-free cooking and baking. So you can just tape that to the back of a cupboard or have it in your kitchen. So that's helpful. But yeah.
I would love that.
Yeah, I'm Instagram and Facebook. I'm for Forksake Book as well.
Right. Okay. We'll have to connect on those venues as well. I'm sure I'll probably be interacting with you again. I have a feeling. In the future, but I'm so grateful to have this conversation and for all that you're doing. Actually that quote, that Margaret Mead quote is so applicable because you took the interest and time and passion and energy to learn about this and then to put it into something that you're now using as a powerful tool. Indeed, I'm going to start using this more as a powerful tool because there are so many people who want to eat this way and they're like, well, what do I do now? And you've created the user's guide. And so for that, really, thank you. And we do our requisite fist bump to the camera. Boom. Thank you. Nice. All right. We are at thehealthfeast.com. We appreciate all of you listening. If you can leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform and subscribe and share, that's how you can support the podcast. And until next time, live well and rock on, everybody.